I think what's behind the question is not just how do you do this and continue to maintain these beliefs and live out of these beliefs, but how do I convince others?
Final question, and this one hits a little bit close to home for me because I worked at a nursing home and I worked with a lot of people that were at the end of life. We actually had a hospice ministry as part of the nursing home that I worked at, and working with the hospice nurses and the care and the beauty of what is done in their profession and their care, and really a lot of times in their ministry is really dynamic. And this question comes from somebody in that line. They say, I'm a nurse who has found myself working in hospice over the last year. I currently live and work in a state that does not allow physician assisted suicide, or death with dignity as it's known, which two surrounding states, Vermont and Maine, do allow. I have twice now had patients or families ask if this is an option. When communicating with the hospice physicians, other nurses, and my director, I've used terminology physician assisted suicide, which both the AMA and the ANA use. The last time our medical director responded to my email saying that the language and the stigma of that matter needs to be called physician assisted death, is how he was requesting that this person would, our questioner would use that phrase. I completely agree that words matter, and I told her that I used that terminology because the patient did, and it would be the premature ending of a human life. My question is, how do I continue to respect my colleagues and the physicians I work with while maintaining my strongly held beliefs in human dignity and that we are all made in the image of God?
Man, what a great question. And I just want to say the answer to the question is keep doing what you're doing. To have the courage to push back and to explain. This is an example of live not by lies. Using the phrase physician assisted death is either a lie, it's more than just kind of a rhetorical sleight of hand. It actually is saying something that's not true. That the physician caused the death and the patient had no say in it. That it wasn't initiated or motivated by suicidal tendencies. And that's just not true. The other thing that it does, and I wonder if you can bring this up, is that physician-assisted death is quite an indictment on the physician. Every medical personnel takes an oath that says that they are to heal, that they are to care, that they're never to harm. That phrase actually says, I assisted in a death. No other situation would that sort of phrase be acceptable, right? I mean, if you worked at an emergency room trauma center, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, and you had a patient come in and a patient that was just beyond saving, and somebody was caring for them, and they said, "Hey, what was the cause of death?" And the ER physician said something like, "Oh, I assisted in their death." No, he would say, I cared for them as they died. I alleviated their suffering, or all kinds of medical lingo, which talks about the amount of care and preventative work that was done, but it was beyond their assistance. This is saying the exact opposite of this. And I just love the fact, that in your desire to do this right, you think, words matter, because words do matter. Words make thoughts possible. And I owe that those words that made that thought possible in my mind to the late great Michael Bauman, a longtime colleague and professor at Hillsdale College, colleague at Summit Ministries, professor at Hillsdale College, because language here matters, and the squishiness around this not only says what's not true about what the patient's role was in this. Secondly, it says what's not true about the physician's role in this. Or maybe it says what is true and just highlights how awful it is that the doctor has made this decision to take his oath, flip it on its head, and now change what it means to provide care, pain management, comfort, resources, healing, and turn it into basically killing. I think that those are legitimate questions to bring up. And I just think it's really interesting. This is something I didn't know, that both the AMA and the ANA still use the term physician-assisted suicide. So there you go. It looks to me like you're the one being professional and using the accepted terminology, and the medical director is not. So I think I think what you've done is remarkable. Now, that doesn't mean, and I sense behind the question here, Wayne, is not just how do I continue to do this and respect my colleagues and the physicians. I think, bringing up the point about how this language says something that's not true about where the patient was, and also says something that's really true about the doctor, and is that really what we want our jobs to be? That's a way to respect your colleagues if you say it, rightly. But I think what's behind the question is not just how do you do this and continue to maintain these beliefs and live out of these beliefs, but how do I convince others? And that's a great question. I think you're doing a wonderful job here of, kind of putting the line where it needs to be. But you could get in trouble for this one. This is one of those things where you could lose a job. And if you do, by the way, lose a job over these sorts of convictions, you should check in with my friends at the Alliance Defending Freedom. They'll be happy to help you, I think. But this is a hard one. This falls under the theology of getting fired. Do I believe this well enough to not say what's not true? Because, what's at stake is not just my job, but human dignity in my state. Man, it's hard to put that much pressure on here, but you're playing a role, and I respect you for it. And I'm really grateful that God has his followers, his courageous followers, have this level of clarity in so many different places around the country. We hear from these listeners all the time, don't we, Wayne? It's just really amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, somebody that's thinking this deeply about their calling, I have nothing but respect for.
Yeah, I love this. These questions are so fun to see because we're standing in the arena, so to speak, and there's a reality of kind of that living in the tempest of the living. You're working these things out, and that's one of the things that I've loved, especially with what we've done with our Proverbs prayer webinar, and taking the time and just spending time in prayer, looking to the Proverbs, seeking wisdom, seeking guidance, because the world is real, and there's a lot of challenges that we're running into, and I think that things like this, what we're doing here with the Q&A, the question and answer time, talking about these challenges that we have coming up, is very important. I think it builds camaraderie, community, that we're in this, and the Lord is good, and we have people that are cheering us on, and you should know as listeners that you're prayed for by the Colson Center as we receive these questions, praying over them, looking at them, praying for God's guidance for you. So again, if you have any questions that come up throughout the course of the week on any commentaries or anything that you're engaging, we invite you to send them to Ask the Colson Center at colsoncenter.org. And again, John, this is really fun to sit in, and my one time. This is exciting to kind of lead some of these questions, and it's been awesome to field them. But I'm looking forward to having Shane on again next week, and we'll continue to get some insight into a lot of these questions. So for John Stone Street, and my name is Wayne Stender from the Colson Center, have a great week, and we'll see you next week.